Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is here, and the long-awaited sequel introduces a bevy of new features for players to try out, either as Peter Parker or Miles Morales. There's a revamped progression system, new traversal and combat elements, and a new way to unlock costumes. So much so that returning players from Marvel's Spider-Man may be wondering what the best route is to take as they progress through the sequel story. Insomniac's latest PlayStation 5 title does provide some pretty clear instructions on how to integrate all of the new tools and features in its locker, but there are certain strategies, routes, and combat tips that are up to the player to adopt and implement themselves. Fortunately, for those seeking greater guidance, WhatCulture is here to impart some wise tips and tricks, like a sort of gaming Uncle Ben, one who stays indoors all the time so thankfully doesn't get killed. So refill those web cartridges, folks. I'm Ewan, this is WhatCulture Gaming, and here are 10 tips and tricks Marvel Spider-Man 2 doesn't tell you. Number 10. Don't underestimate tech parts. When it comes to unlocking suits and upgrades, tokens were very much the name of the game in the first Marvel Spider-Man. The sequel upends this system slightly, still requiring hero tokens to unlock certain suits and gadget upgrades, but with the addition of tech parts, which are hidden in various caches across the map. These cases, which vary between basic tech parts and legendary tech parts, are fairly abundant in-game compared to the other collectibles, so it can be tempting to ignore them if you're in the flow of web-slinging your way around New York. However, while stopping and starting your swinging can be frustrating, it is much better to grab these parts on the go rather than neglect them altogether, as upgrades can be expensive, and you want to make sure you're as well equipped as possible to sample as many of the new suit unlocks as you can. Keep an eye out for the Miles and Peter skill, which enables you to highlight tech part caches on the minimap too. This will make tracking them down much easier and ensure you aren't wanting the parts when you find yourself desperate to try a new suit or colorway. Number 9. Make sure to unlock the War Thrash skill as soon as possible. One of the showpiece moments in the Marvel Spider-Man 2 gameplay reveal, which I think we all remember, came very early on, when a symbiote-suited Peter Parker lays into a craven thug who's pinned against the wall. Similar in a way to the beatdown mechanic from the Batman Arkham games, this move deals high damage to a chosen target and also provides a nice flourish in combat. Weirdly, though, it's a skill that you can miss if you are paying close attention. Said skill, called War Thrash, is located in the Peter and Miles section of the skills menu, and is unlocked after advancing through the combat section of the tree. It's easy to miss though, particularly if you're spending more time upgrading Peter and Miles' specific skills, or because you put more attention into the traversal and stealth sections of the shared tree. Number 8. Prioritize projectile enemies in combat. While there's no set order to how players should go about taking down enemies in Marvel Spider-Man 2, there are some that can prove more problematic than others and may benefit from being webbed up as soon as possible. Projectile enemies, particularly the ones in Kraven the Hunter's faction, can prove especially bothersome if their numbers are allowed to accumulate, forcing either Spider-Man to dodge their arsenal attacks, and in turn making it more difficult to take down a given target. These projectile enemies can also bounce around the environment, pull you down in midair, and even ensnare both Spider-Man in a net that they then have to break out of. They're less easy to leave alone in Marvel Spider-Man 2 than they were in the previous 2 games, with Insomniac having removed the perfect counter takedown for nailing a projectile dodge, which means they demand more attention. Number 7. Try turning off swing assist settings. While the web swinging in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is fantastic as is, there is a feature that more experienced Spidey players may wish to switch off to get more out of it. By heading into gameplay settings and cranking the swing assist sliders down to low, players will be able to experiment with all kinds of different slinging techniques to fling Peter and Miles all across New York. This will make the web slinging of Marvel Spider-Man 2 more akin to how it was in classic Spider-Man games like Spider-Man 2 and Ultimate Spider-Man, which were less arcadey and more physics-based. This change won't be for everyone, particularly as this kind of swinging freedom can lead you to crashing Peter and Miles into buildings and the ground, causing them to take significant damage. But it could make a nice change of pace for those after more of a challenge, and who don't mind becoming a spider pancake every now and again. Number 6. Practice those parries. Probably the biggest learning curve for returning players in Marvel Spider-Man 2 will be parrying. As opposed to the previous game, where attacks could either be dodged with the press of the circle button or by swinging away, there are certain enemies whose attacks cannot be dodged and must be parried, which is mapped to L1 on the PS5's DualSense controller. Bigger enemies, certain weapon-wielding types, and of course bosses can all execute attacks that need to be parried, and at first, it can be difficult to keep track of them in the carnage of a given combat encounter. The parry symbol does look bigger and slightly different from the basic dodge icon, but they are similar enough to cause confusion, and given the previous 2 Marvel Spider-Man games had players dodging a lot of attacks, it can be easy to get mixed up. As with most challenges in video games though, practice makes perfect. There might be a motivation to simply jump away from these undodgeable attacks, but your best bet is to stick with the parries and keep practicing until you find that sweet spot. Number 5. Avoid crimes when listening to podcasts. One of the highlights of the first Marvel Spider-Man, as well as Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, were the podcasts. Whether it was Just the Facts with J. Jonah Jameson or the Acast, these bits of dialogue were humorous, informative story moments that added further context to each game's story. Both JJ and Danica return in Marvel Spider-Man 2, the former now reinstated in his role as the editor-in-chief of the Daily Bugle, but unlike those games where you could access these podcast episodes in the event they were interrupted by a crime or a given story event, you actually can't catch up on them here. It's a bit of a frustrating foible with the game, and it means that currently, if you don't want to miss out on a podcast, your best bet is to hang tight and just let it play out. Number 4. Don't rely on photo opportunities to explore New York. The already impressive open world of Marvel Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales has been expanded further in the sequel, with the game introducing 2 new boroughs in Queens and Brooklyn. However, as noted in my review, there aren't as many guided opportunities to explore the open world as you may be hoping for. Backpacks and landmarks are gone, with the only substitute being photo opportunities, which allow Peter and Miles to capture moments in NYC's everyday life and submit them to Robbie Robertson as part of his open call for submissions. While these photo opportunities are fun in and of themselves, they don't show the full gamut of what the open world has to offer. Many of the Marvel landmarks seen in the previous titles return, with the bizarre exception of Nelson and Murdoch's offices, which I've so far been unable to find, and please, if you have found them, let me know because I need to know they're okay. But there are also tiny Easter eggs and secrets to track down and experience. In short, make sure you're stopping every now and then to explore all of what New York has to offer. Number 3. The symbiote is cool, but mechanical arms are just as good. The symbiote arrives like a bit of a lightning bolt in Marvel Spider-Man 2. Grafting itself to Peter midway through the story and opening up a raft of new abilities, the black costume is great fun to use and ups the OG Spidey's power levels significantly. However, bringing the symbiote-less version of the character closer in parity with Miles, Insomniac also gave Peter 4 new mechanical arms to use in combat, similar to those sported by the Iron Spider armor and the Superior Spider-Man suit from the comics. The arms themselves have their own skill trees and bring their own benefits in combat, and definitely shouldn't be forgotten about once Peter makes a switch to the symbiote. Number 2. Tether web lines together to transform stealth encounters. One of the best new gameplay features introduced in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is the web lines. By holding L2 and pressing triangle, so long as you're in stealth and between 2 solid surfaces, both Spider-Man will be able to create a web rope that enables them to move silently above their targets. This frees the player to get a little bit more creative with how they approach certain stealth encounters, allowing them to move to the middle of a stealth area as opposed to having to stick to just the corners themselves. There are multiple ways of getting the most out of these web lines, one of which involves an upgrade that lets Peter and Miles web up to 3 enemies at once from these perches, but one of the best requires no upgrade at all. When positioned on a web line, players can use the same ability again to tether a new web line to the one they're already balanced on top of, essentially letting them create a rudimentary spider's web over their unassuming enemies. Not only does the tactic make stealth encounters a bit easier, but it's also just really fun to create your own web network and lure enemies in like a less monstrous 90s man spider. If you know, you know. And number 1. Take your time. While all the aforementioned tips and tricks should go some way in making sure you get the most out of your Marvel Spider-Man 2 experience, there is one age-old piece of advice that you should also bear in mind. No, not the Uncle Ben one. This one is different. Take your time. Marvel Spider-Man 2 is a big game, and it's releasing a little over 5 years since the first title. It'll take around 22 hours to 100% complete, so by the time this video comes out, I'm assuming loads of people already have completed it, but that also includes finishing the story, side quests, upgrades, and collectibles. And it's a playtime that's best savored rather than being wolfed down in one go. Look, spoiler anxiety is real, and it's completely understandable why some players will no doubt be rushing through the story to get to the finish line, especially with all the leaks that were doing the rounds before the game even came out. Still, this is one you want to soak in rather than blast through quickly. And those were 10 tips and tricks Marvel Spider-Man 2 doesn't tell you. Have any other tips and advice to share? Help your spider friends out in the comments below. Be sure to drop the video a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want more. Either way, thank you all for watching. I've been Ewan, this has been WhatCulture Gaming, and until next time, thwip you later. Bye!